Hello and welcome to another video. So, as you might have known, I've been using Arch Linux on my main home computer for almost a year now, and because one of the main reasons why I switched from Windows 10 to Arch Linux was the privacy concerns that come with the proprietary operating systems. So I wanted to address some of my issues with today's surveillance economy, and so that's what I would like to talk about to you in this video. So what is the surveillance economy of our current era? So basically we have a lot of these digital services that collect and profit off users' data. So I guess most of the computer literate people who understand a little more about the workings of Facebook, Google, or even Microsoft and Amazon, we should be aware that a lot of the revenue for these companies, especially for ones like Facebook and Google, where they give their most popular services for the users for free. So where are they making money if they are not making money of providing the service to the users? Well, of course, they are making money from providing service to someone else. And what is this service they provide? Well, basically Facebook is generally just the largest or one of the largest advertisement platforms, basically. So it pretends to be a social network. It hooks you in based on its pretense of being a social network, and then it sells your data and also profits from your data through their advertisement campaigns. And similar for Google and even Microsoft and Amazon, who do have legitimate revenue streams from services they provide. They just have a lot of data on their users that they basically can use those to profit off. And of course this list is not exhaustive, and there are a lot of other companies that do similar things or try to do similar things. And also we have other electronic services that collect data, and while this is not their main purpose, the data they collect is really large, enormous data sets are available for them, and they can use this data, or they can give this data to someone to use it. For example, cell phone providers have a very good knowledge about your whereabouts, not just now, but of course the data is logged, so they can basically draw a map of where did your cell phone move around in the last I don't know how many days. Or credit card companies, they also have all this data. So maybe the credit card company makes all its profits based on your purchases, but of course it logs all your purchases, the amount, where did you spend that money, etc. And who knows what this data can be used for. Maybe the companies that provide these services don't use these themselves, but it doesn't mean that you are safe from abuse of this data. So the attitude of the general public towards these problems is well, quite mild generally. So there are a lot of people who are just generally ignorant about these topics. They don't really know, they don't really understand the scope of the data collection. And of course there are people who've heard about it, but based on their incredulity, such as, they cannot imagine how this data is useful to some company. So for example, someone would say that, how is it useful for Facebook to know whether I like, the cat pictures or the dog pictures more, or whether I am in a group for homeopathy, or whether I'm in a skeptic group. I just incredulous about how this data could be useful to anyone. Or of course the other kind of attitude can be that there is just no way that someone can sort through all this data. And this attitude is kind of on the decline now, as more and more people start to understand how powerful the data analysis techniques are of today. But like maybe 15 years ago, someone would say like, oh no, I'm not worried about just random wiretapping of the phones, because there is just not enough people wiretapping phones so they could just listen to all the conversations, or there are not enough people in the security services around the world to read all the emails, so I'm just not worried about my emails being read by security services. So this kind of attitude can be used for these services. Like, I just cannot believe that Facebook has the power to analyze its millions of users, of the data of its millions of users, or some kind of incredulity based on that. So of course there are people who both aware of the scope of the data collection and understand the possibilities that come with analyzing this data, and they just accept it based on some kind of attitude like, Facebook lets me connect with my friends, it lets me have very nice conversations and arguments with other people, I can follow up on all these celebrities on Instagram, and I can read what the president thinks on Twitter, and these are kind of the conveniences that are given to me, and for this convenience I gladly give all my data to these companies. They just do whatever they want. I don't think my data my privacy is worth to me as much that I can get out of these services, for example. And of course there is like kind of this cynic attitude, which comes down to this like, oh, so you are concerned about your privacy, so what do you have to hide? What are you hiding from everyone? Are you doing crimes? So I literally heard one very popular YouTuber talking about cash versus debit cards or credit cards, and he's like, why are you worried about the credit card companies following your purchases? Are you doing crimes? If I would do crimes, I would still use credit cards, because just no one would care to follow it. So there is this kind of cynical attitude that if you are worried about your privacy, then you probably have something to hide. And if you have nothing to hide, then why are you worried about all these companies knowing all these things about you? So of course there are possible dangers in this data collection, like your data can just be sold to some entity that maybe uses it to manipulate you, which was like the Cambridge Analytica leak a few years back, which was a Facebook kind of problem where this Analytica company could just use the Facebook API and just gather a lot of data from Facebook and use it for some kind of nefarious political purposes. So, for example, there is a story about the Target, United States, the store chain where the girl was usually purchasing, and one day they received the coupons for like baby stuff, like newborn babies stuff, so they got the coupons for, and her father was like really angry, like, my daughter is just like 17 years old, why are you sending these coupons to her? And then it turned out that she was pregnant, and just based on her change in the her shopping behavior basically changed in a way that previously, based on previous data, has been shown at Target that when a woman or a female member, maybe this membership for their discount card or whatever, if you change your behavior this way, then maybe a few months later you will start buying the baby products, because this kind of shopping behavioral change is indicative of you being pregnant. So they just preemptively send out all these coupons for the baby stuff. So when the baby is born, then you don't go to another store because you just keep going to Target because they figured out what will you buy next and they already provided some nominal discount for that. So basically, from this data that they gather about you, you cannot really know beforehand what kind of information these big data analysis tools can gather. So for example, based on your Facebook groups and type of conversations you have, maybe they can give a very high chance of which party would you support in an election. And maybe, you know, they figure out that those kind of people who are parts of these kind of groups and engage in these kind of conversations are very likely to vote for party A and are very firm in their resolve that they would never vote for party B, but they are very strict, like or very strictly voting on party A. So what if we could target them with paid promotions which basically tell them that, oh, voting is meaningless, and maybe, you know, we cannot convince them to vote party B, but maybe we can just nudge them in a way that they won't show up at the polling station, and that will be good for party B. So this kind of manipulation tactics could be done against you, could be performed against you based on this high amount of data. Of course, another risk is that even if the company is super ethical and never ever would use any data that they collected on you in any way, they just store it on their hard drives and they never ever look at this. Maybe, you know, if there is like a server malfunction, they just look back the logs and reconstruct their database or something like that. So just this purpose. But what if their security is not 100% good and a hacker group can compromise the data? What if a hacker group can get some kind of data that they can sell for a terrorist group, and the terrorist group can figure out which is the time of the day based on this data when they could, you know, strike with the highest number of casualties. So this is kind of a very dramatic example that I'm trying to give here, just to, you know, this is like the very over the top kind of things that could happen, but I think it is good to keep in mind that these kind of things are possible in today's surveillance economy. And of course, the third is, which is usually the only thing that the people who are cynically talking about, like, what do you have to hide? Are you committing crimes? This kind of crowd, is that basically the data that is stored about you on someone else's server is in general is not considered to be in your possession. So that data is, even if it is about you, it is in possession of the company. So if you know, a government agency wants to get the data on you, so if you have, I don't know, your data is stored on, just you store it for yourself, you maybe write it down in a notebook or something and keep it at your house, then for the government agency to get this notebook with this data has to go to a judge and get a warrant for it, and then, you know, you can get your lawyers and try to do something about that, but they cannot just get your notebook, at least in most countries where the rule of law applies. They cannot just get this data legally from you without some kind of a procedure that involves you directly. While if this data is stored on someone else's computer somewhere else, they don't need to involve you in this matter anyway, because they just have to get the data from the company who stores it. And well, maybe, you know, in some countries there are like more strict privacy laws that even in that case would force the government agencies to both contact you and the one who's storing the data, but, you know, that is just in general I think is just worth thinking about it, that maybe a government agency just gets your data from these companies without you ever knowing about it and without you ever committing any crimes. You don't need to be a criminal. Sometimes you just get in the crosshairs for some reason that you have no control over. And of course, so I talked about what is the general attitude and what are the dangers about this surveillance economy, but it is not really easy for us to conceptualize, to understand it on a gut level how it works. So basically my 3 guidelines for my case, for me to understand better on like not just the pure logical level, but on like a more human level how this works, is that like, are there things that are legal but you are not comfortable sharing with your peers? Because I guess most of us have some kind of shyness about some of the things. Like, we don't tell our mom everything, we don't tell our friends everything, so I don't think we should be comfortable telling a stranger in a different country running thousands of servers about all our stuff. So this is basically, one of the key things that I think worth thinking about. And so the second one is like, would you mind if the data was or the data were being collected in person? So for example, those people who think that Facebook is just collecting my data to serve me better advertisements. Would you be comfortable with this situation if Facebook would send someone to your house and the person would be just like, looking through your windows or things like that, get into your house, check what books are on your shelves, just so the next week they can send you book promotions that are more customized for your taste? Would you be comfortable with that? I wouldn't. And of course, would you be comfortable with someone writing down information next to you? So even, if it's not like this kind of personal things that are happening in your house, but for example, your purchases, when you buy something with a credit card, would you be comfortable with someone from the credit card company following you to every store and writing down every purchase, like time, date, location, amount, wherever you go? Would you like that? I wouldn't. And this is why I always pay cash as much as I can. And so of course there are some ways to fight this, and I think we should consider these ways. So of course, one and most important is just use free and open source software wherever possible, but most importantly, use a free and open source operating system like Linux, for example. So I just talked about this with one of my friends, and in Eastern Europe, especially when you are young and a student and don't have money, it is very easy to get hold of a Windows copy which is cracked. And Microsoft probably could just spend a lot of money trying to sue everyone who is using like an illegal version of Windows, or try to come up with some clever solutions so they can brick those Windows 10 installations that are cracked or whatever. But they don't do that because probably it would be costing them a lot more money than what they could earn, and well, they can still collect data on the users of the cracked Windows versions. So that's, I think, a good sign for why you should be considering switching to Linux, of course. My second rule is basically just try to avoid large companies on the internet, and especially try to avoid linking your profiles across different services. So just try to keep a profile on one web service as small as possible, so don't just give too much data to one company. And if you register on Facebook and then you use your Facebook ID to register to 100 other web pages, then who knows how much Facebook knows about you. Other thing is never store sensitive data on public cloud services like Google Drive, and I would consider sensitive data, for example, your family photos. I know that it is kind of trendy nowadays to just share on Facebook your family photos with everyone, but when I was a child, we didn't have digital photography. We had our family photos in a photo album in a drawer in our house, and I was very happy about it as a kid because none of my classmates could just randomly find family photos of me while I was a little kid. And I think, yeah, just keep those things on your own computer and share with others in a more secure way than just keeping them on the cloud, because we all know that sometimes these cloud servers get hacked, and also we don't know how much we can trust those who provide those services. Okay, manage your web cookies properly. That's another thing. Facebook doesn't just follow you on the facebook.com page. So Facebook is very notorious about a lot having, like a lot of websites and companies have their Facebook page, and they offer this kind of window on their web page where you can just click here to like us on Facebook or leave a comment for this article on Facebook, and those kind of little boxes, they will all follow you on Facebook. So that will pull content from the facebook.com website or some kind of Facebook service, and Facebook will be following you through those even if you are not logged in or you don't even have a Facebook account. They can follow you. Similar with Google. So for example, for this I use Firefox, and Firefox has this Facebook container application or Facebook container extension which will separate your data that is stored in cookies by other sites and will try to defend you from this kind of tracking from Facebook by blocking certain Facebook related stuff, unless you explicitly ask the extension to load these Facebook API related stuffs. And of course there is another rule that you can keep if you have a mobile phone that does not have an open source operating system like Android or the Google, absolutely not Google free, but like a totally Google connected Android or whatever, like a Apple phone, an iPhone. Maybe you can try to protect your privacy a little bit more if you just keep your phone in an airplane mode, but I don't even know, maybe even if you keep them in an airplane mode, they will still be able to follow you. I'm not really sure how to defend about that. Maybe you can just leave your mobile phone at home whenever you don't really need that to use it when you are outside. But hopefully we will just get some very good Linux phones in the near future. I will be there when they come out and will be consumer ready. Okay, so what to do? This is my last slide. I promise this has been a very long presentation, but I think it's important, so I don't mind. So what should we do? So in this list, the first 4 are things that I already done, and the other 4 are things that I haven't done yet, but on the way of trying to do that. So for example, operating system, I just switched to Linux to keep myself on a free and open source operating system, and I prefer to use free and open source software as much as possible on my home computer. Search engine, I am not using Google anymore, not even at work. Whenever I can, I just use DuckDuckGo, but maybe if you are more paranoid, you can try some kind of a Search instance somewhere. It is a very interesting project. You can find quite nice videos about this one. You can also use some kind of backup and synchronization method, which is not using any of these cloud services. I am using SyncThing to synchronize things between my computers. And for email service, maybe you should check out ProtonMail. I recently registered a ProtonMail address and I really like it. It is not like the most, I think it's a little less convenient to use than Gmail, but nothing really, so it's not bad, it's quite good actually. And hopefully they are trustworthy with keeping the emails properly encrypted. The only problem is that everyone who I send emails to have a Gmail address, so everything I send to someone will be read by Google at some point probably. Anyways, so following stuff like, music bands or politicians or whatever, instead of using Facebook or Instagram, you can try using RSS feeds, and there are projects out there that will help you converting a Facebook or Instagram feed to an RSS feed. You can try looking that up on the internet. Cloud storage, for example, instead of the Google Drive or the OneDrive, you can have a Nextcloud instance. For this you will need a server, so you might have to maybe you have to rent a virtual server and install Nextcloud there. For voice chat you can use Mumble, or video conferencing you could use Jitsi, but these three all require your own server if you really want to use that. Or, well, for Mumble there are some, I found some servers where you can just pay some very slow monthly fee and you can use that for kind of a voice chat or voice conference or stuff like that. And so this is the end of my presentation. So thank you for coming. Oh, and of course, as in keeping with my desire to use more and more services that are more compatible with the freedoms and our privacy concerns, my videos are now up on Library too, and well, just check me out on Library too. If you prefer that to YouTube, then you can subscribe there, or you can subscribe on both and blow up my subscriber counts on both YouTube and Library. And I will see you in the next video. I hope you enjoyed this. Give me a thumbs up if you think this rant was useful, or give me 2 thumbs downs if you didn't like it, or just leave me a comment if you want to get into an argument with me, because I am down to a good argument on the internet. Nothing wrong have ever happened because 2 strangers got at it on the internet. So I will see you next time. Bye bye.